Hello, this is a guy who likes fanfiction and is too lazy to read, so here is Frayed Truths in audio form. Check the description for the links to the author. Chapter 1. Itachi Uchiha exits the inn through the large hole blasted through the wall, and his partner follows right on his heels. He doesn't even glance back at his brother, just leaps through the circle of black flames and flees. Naruto steps forward, eyes wide. Jiraiya's arm snaps out to halt him before he can get any closer to the strange fire. "Don't touch it." The boy stops immediately, stunned by the sharpness in the man's voice. Jiraiya pulls out a scroll from his belt, then knees down on the floor. The scroll is covered in black writing Naruto doesn't understand, but when Jiraiya presses his hand against it, the black flames are sealed safely into the scroll. He rolls it back up and returns it to his waist. What the hell was that? Naruto wants to demand. He has a dozen questions he wants to ask, but there's something much more important that steals his attention. Sasuke is slumped against the wall on the floor, motionless. Naruto falls down by his side. His heart jumps into his throat at his teammate's battered, lifeless body, because he remembers this scene. He's been here before. He remembers holding Sasuke's senbon-littered body in his arms, tears hot against his cheeks and blood slippery on his hands. He remembers the anguish that spiked through his heart, at the realization that he'd lost something he hadn't realized he'd miss. No, Naruto thinks, the same desperation rising in his chest. Sasuke looks the same as he did then, bruised and beaten and so very, very still. Naruto sees Sasuke's chest move, and his breath escapes him in an overwhelming wave of relief. "Sasuke," Naruto says. His hands hover uncertainly over the other boy's body, shaking slightly. He looks worse than his battle with Haku, Naruto realizes. Even more fragile. Naruto can't stop seeing the way he was carelessly thrown around, can't stop hearing the sound of his screams and his bones breaking. At least, with Haku, it was a real fight. This was just a beatdown. Itachi Uchiha, Sasuke's brother. Naruto can still see his cold eyes, the expression on Sasuke's face as he glared into them, with more hatred than Naruto thought a person capable of feeling. They were complete opposites as they faced off, despite their eerily similar appearances. One made of ice and the other made of fire. Naruto shivers as he remembers the words. Naruto is the prize the Akatsuki is after. Why? What did that mean? For now, Naruto tries to shove down the questions spinning in his brain. He tries to stop the sounds of Sasuke's screams from echoing in his ears. He's never heard anyone scream like that before, in utter and complete agony. And for it to be Sasuke, who is always so cool and composed no matter the situation. Jiraiya walks over to his pupil, the expression on his face grave in a way the blonde's never seen before today. "Naruto." Naruto ignores him. He clenches his teeth as Sasuke remains unmoving, fear replacing the previous relief that he's alive. Naruto grabs him by the shoulders and shakes him. "Sasuke. Sasuke. Wake up, you bastard." Jiraiya places a hand on Naruto's shoulder to stop him. "Naruto," he repeats, firmer this time, "stop. He could have a concussion." Naruto stops shaking him immediately, but keeps his hands on Sasuke's shoulders. Jiraiya crouches down next to him, his mouth tightening as he looks at Sasuke more closely, and Naruto watches him anxiously. "What is it? He's gonna be okay, right?" Jiraiya places his fingers on the side of Sasuke's neck, waiting. After a few seconds, his expression eases slightly and he pulls back. His pulse is strong. Still, his breathing is rattling slightly. He could have a punctured lung. He needs to be taken to a hospital, immediately. Naruto feels alarm go through him. Punctured lung? That doesn't sound good at all. Jiraiya shakes his head. What was the boy thinking, running in after Itachi like that? Naruto scowls, anger sparking slightly at the disapproving tone. "Why did you let him, then? You just stood there while he was getting the crap beaten out of him." The white-haired man winces. "Naruto, He never gets to finish whatever excuse he's going to make." At that moment, a large green blur crashes through the open wall of the building where the two missing nin just fled through, yelling out a war cry. Jiraiya has no time to react as a foot collides full force with his face. Naruto leans instinctively over to shield Sasuke. The green blur is Guy-sensei, standing splendorous in his garish jumpsuit. Haha. Victory is mine, you fool. His eyes finally catch up with his mouth as he processes the scene in front of him, Jiraiya shoving himself off the floor with an irate expression, stemming the rapid flow of blood from his nostrils and a large boot print on his right cheek. Oh, Guy says, eyes widening, and the grin slipping from his face. Oops. Oops. Jiraiya repeats angrily. His voice comes out thick and garbled, his hand pressed against his bloody nose. What the hell was that? Guy laughs awkwardly as Jiraiya pulls out some gauze to staunch the blood and wipe off his face. I am deeply sorry, he says loudly. I was using the reflection of my headband to see inside and spied two shadowy figures. I mistook you for the enemy. The enemy is gone, Jiraiya grumbles, still glaring. You better hope you didn't break my nose. You knew they were coming here. The Jounin-sensei nods. Yes. They came to Konoha first, looking for Naruto. Sasuke overheard and went chasing after them. His expression sobers, becoming pained, as he looks at the dark-haired boy's battered body. I tried to reach him in time to stop him. I see I came too late. Naruto's mind is abuzz with questions. He's so confused. Konoha, he says, eyes wide. Is everyone okay? Kakashi went head-to-head against Itachi. I'm afraid even his elite moves were no match for the likes of him. He was hurt rather badly. Naruto straightens, blue eyes widening. Kakashi-sensei. Is he? He's going to be alright, Guy is quick to reassure him. Don't you worry. Nothing can keep my rival down for long. Naruto feels some of the fear in his chest dissipate at the words, but he still feels extremely worried and anxious. Sasuke being taken down so easily is one thing, but Kakashi is another. He feels chilled by the idea. And the knowledge that someone so powerful is after him. What would have happened if Jiraiya didn't show up? That shark guy would have cut my legs off, Naruto thinks, recalling the words and the sword slicing down. I probably would have bled to death. He shudders at the mental image. Guy's eyes fall back down to Sasuke. Itachi did this, I presume. Is the damage bad? He needs medical attention, says Jiraiya. He came rushing at Itachi. Foolish kid. Don't know what he thought he could possibly do against him. And you didn't do anything, Naruto snaps, once again angry at the man for reproaching Sasuke's actions. In a different situation, Naruto would enjoy telling Sasuke how thoughtless his actions were. Perhaps it would take the arrogant bastard down a peg or two. But not now. Sasuke is seriously hurt, and Jiraiya didn't even try to step in to help him out. Jiraiya winces slightly. I was trying to give Sasuke a chance to fight his own battle. He told us to stay out of it. He was being an idiot. You weren't supposed to listen to him. The Toad Sage looks at him for a moment, and there's regret on his face, but he says nothing to the words. With a grimace, he looks away from Naruto to Guy. Itachi put him in some sort of genjutsu. I don't know what it did, but the way he screamed, there could be mental damage. Guy's eyes widen slightly. A genjutsu, you said? Yes, why? Kakashi was hit by a genjutsu as well. Naruto catches the worried grimace that flickers across Guy's face. If they were one and the same, no, it doesn't bear thinking about now. Give Sasuke to me. I'll take him back to Konoha. Naruto tenses, drawing closer to his teammate. He doesn't want anyone to take him from him. He needs to know he's going to be okay. Guy's face softens when he sees the genin's expression. He crouches down on the floor next to him, at the boy's level. Naruto, he says. The gentleness in his voice is off-putting from someone usually so loud and upbeat. I'm going to get him help, but I need you to let me pick him up. I promise to hurt him as little as possible. Naruto hesitates, but he lets his hand slide from Sasuke's shoulders. He scoots back slightly, allowing the older shinobi to take Sasuke into his arms. He's careful as he picks the boy up, doing his best not to jostle any of his injuries, but Naruto still can't help but wince. You don't think he's coming back? Guy asks. His voice lowers slightly as his eyes flicker briefly to Naruto. You think they were after him because... Jiraiya nods. Naruto grinds his teeth, feeling a burst of frustration at everyone still keeping secrets from him. He thought he was finally done with that when he learned about the Kyuubi, but still, the adults continued never telling him anything. Get the kid to the hospital, Jiraiya says. I don't expect they'll try to capture him again, but Naruto will be safe with me. Wait, what? Naruto's eyes snap away from Sasuke's unconscious form. He pushes himself off the floor to stand. What do you mean? I'm not leaving Sasuke. Naruto, we need to find Tsunade. The village is vulnerable to an attack so long as it's without a Hokage. It's imperative one be instated as soon as possible. Naruto isn't sure what imperative means, but he doesn't care. Then you go. I'm going with Bushibrow-sensei. I can't go by myself, Jiraiya says. I need you, Naruto. Why? Naruto demands. I don't even know this lady you're looking for. Jiraiya's expression grows firm, his eyes narrowing. You're coming. Naruto matches the look with his own fierce glare. He's opening his mouth to snap out another refusal, annoyed at the man for trying to order him around, when Guy speaks up again. Naruto-kun, he says. There's nothing you can do for him. I will get him to the hospital and will make sure he's taken care of. The woman you're looking for, Tsunade Senju, is a brilliant medic. If you can get her to return to Konoha, she can heal your friend up easily. Naruto wavers when he hears this, biting his lip. He doesn't want to leave Sasuke when he's so injured. But if going with Jiraiya is the best way for Naruto to help him. He takes a few steps forward and looks down at his teammate's pale face. His eyes catch on the trickle of blood near the corner of his mouth, his broken wrist and the harsh redness of the skin at his throat. He looks breakable, like he did in the Land of Waves, and it's so very wrong. Okay, Naruto says, jaw clenched. Fine. He looks back at Sasuke and says fiercely, you need to get yourself better, bastard. You promised me we would have a fight, remember? No backing out. Reluctantly, feeling a strange ache in his heart, Naruto steps back. He watches as Guy gives a nod to Jiraiya, repositioning Sasuke so his head leans against his shoulder. He leaves the building the same way he entered it, through the large hole blasted in the wall. Jiraiya places a comforting hand on his student's shoulder. Come on, he says. Let's get going. Before the inn's manager comes up here and attempts to make us pay for all this damage. Chapter 2. It doesn't take Guy long to return to Konoha. The inn where he found Naruto and Jiraiya was in a quaint little village just outside the border of the Hidden Leaf. In less than 20 minutes he's arriving at the hospital with Sasuke cradled gently in his arms. The boy is still unconscious, hasn't shown any signs of stirring. Guy's worry grows, the longer he doesn't wake up. He tried to be careful with him on the run back, but he has no doubt that the genin's injuries were jostled greatly and frequently. It's a bad sign that the pain didn't jolt him at all back to consciousness. Guy tries not to think about the genjutsu Jiraiya said the boy was placed under. Kurane and Asuma have told him about Kakashi's fight with Itachi that he was placed under some powerful type of genjutsu. It's the reason why his rival hasn't woken up yet, why he now lays in a coma. If Sasuke has suffered the same trick, then Guy doesn't want to consider the damage it would do to the mind of a child. What will he tell his rival when he wakes up? A pit forms in Guy's stomach. It is his failure that has allowed this to happen. He should have been faster in catching the boy when he ran. No, the boy should have never even found out Itachi was in the village. That damn Jounin who burst into the room and ran his mouth. Guy will find him and make sure he's reprimanded. The secretary at the hospital's front desk quickly goes to get him help when she sees the unconscious kid in his arms. He's led to a room by a dark-haired woman dressed in hospital garb, and there's a second mednin inside who directs him to lay Sasuke down on the small cot. Guy hunches down, careful to jostle the weight in his arms as little as possible. Sasuke's shallow breaths puff against the crook of his neck, reassurance that the boy is alive, and Guy's reluctant to let him go and lose that. But he sets the genin down gently on the bed, and he prays he won't have to deliver heartbreaking news to Kakashi. Sasuke looks very small and still against the white sheets. His lips are red with blood, his wrist jutting at an unnatural angle. His clothes are wrinkled and dusty, and the metal plate of his hitayate sits crooked against his forehead. He reminds Guy very much of Lee. How his poor student looked, his body broken and bruised, as he was carried out of the arena on a stretcher. He's in this very hospital now, just a couple floors up, coming to terms with the horrible reality that he will never be a shinobi again. It paralyzed Guy with terror, seeing his precious student like that. It fills him with heartbreak now. He doesn't wish those feelings on Kakashi, and he already knows the man is going to blame himself for this when he wakes up. Guy reaches out to brush Sasuke's bangs from his forehead. He fixes his hitayate so it's straight. What happened to him? The female Mednin asks. The other, a young shinobi with androgynous features, leans over Sasuke to surveil the damage. He was attacked, Guy says simply. He doubts Ataka's visit to the village has remained a secret, but for now he figures it's best not to mention it to anyone. I only arrived after it happened, so I can't tell you much. I know he was placed under a genjutsu. The younger Mednin looks away from Sasuke to look at him. Is he your student, Jounin-san? No, Guy says. Kakashi Hatake is his sensei. He's indisposed at the moment. He was attacked by the same man who did this. Is there anyone that should be notified? His parents. Cow, the female Mednin says pointedly. The young Mednin looks over at her and she says, he's the Uchiha kid. Oh. Understanding passes through blue eyes, followed by pity. And Guy's heart aches for this boy. Orphans are plentiful in Konoha, aren't something anyone does a double take at. But for this child, who belongs to the once great Uchiha clan, he should not be without any family to call upon and sit by his bedside. Instead, his family is the one who put him here. You realize, the female Mednin says, that we won't be able to release any information to you on his condition once he's stabilized. Guy frowns. I'm a registered Jounin sensei. Like I've said, his own sensei is out of commission. The woman shakes her head. I'm sorry. To her credit, she does look genuinely apologetic. We can give you his general condition once it's been determined, but any information beyond that can't be disclosed. Only the person whose care he's under is privileged to know information regarding his condition and treatment. Guy's teeth clench. This isn't a surprise to him, but it's still beyond frustrating. When a genin is placed onto their three-man squad following graduation, the responsibility of their care is transferred to the Jounin sensei they've been assigned to. For kids with parents, this means the sensei acquiring the guardian's permission. For the dozens of orphans, it's done automatically. Sasuke is under Kakashi's care now, so he's the only one authorized on information on him and the Hokage, of course. But Kakashi is still unconscious. And Lord Third is dead. Guy feels a familiar grief pass over him at the reminder. It has been little more than a week since Sarutobi's passing. The man considered this village his family, and each of its citizens had a connection with him, Guy included. His loss is felt very keenly. He looks past the Mednin, to the dark-haired boy on the bed. May I remain here for him, at least? You'll have to leave the room while he's being treated, she tells him, but yes, you may stay here. There's a waiting room outside. Guy nods. Thank you, he says, and bows his head to her. He gives a last, lingering glance to his rival's unconscious student, before reluctantly turning around and exiting the room. His heart is heavy with feelings of frustration and inadequacy, but negative emotions like that aren't helping anyone. Through sheer force of will, he banishes them from his heart. If being here and standing vigil is all he can do, then that is what Guy will do. He will stand here for Kakashi, who cannot be here himself. He will stand here for this young boy, who has no one else to stay with him. Kurane and Asuma have been at Kakashi's apartment since noon that morning, keeping watch over their friend and waiting for him to wake up. The sky outside Kakashi's bedroom window is slowly darkening now as afternoon edges into evening. Asuma has left to go be with his nephew Kano Amaru, who has been temporarily left in his care following Sarutobi's death. Kurane feels an intense sense of guilt, looking down at Kakashi. She wasn't able to do anything against Itachi Uchiha. She was helpless. Kakashi was forced to come to her rescue, and now, because she was so weak, he's like this. Asuma, at least, was able to hold his own against Kisame. What was she thinking, trying to use genjutsu? Had she taken leave of her senses? She still has a throb in her side from where Ataka kicked her through the air and into the lake. It's going to turn into a dark bruise. And now she's waiting by Kakashi's bedside anxiously praying for him to wake up, but also praying he doesn't, because she doesn't want to be the one to tell him that his student ran after an S-rank criminal and might be dead right now. Kurane sighs. She looks up at the two photographs on the table beside Kakashi's bed. The one of Kakashi's genin team, the haunting faces of Obito and Rin staring back from behind the frame. And his team now as a Jounin sensei, their positions and expressions an eerie mirror to the first photo. Hours after Guy ran after Sasuke Uchiha, he returns to Kakashi's apartment. Kurane hears the sound of the front door opening, and she immediately pushes herself to her feet when Guy appears in the bedroom doorway. What happened? Did you catch up with the kid? Guy's face falls into dismay. Not in time, I'm afraid. The man's expression doesn't look quite as shattered as she imagines it would be if Kakashi's student were dead, but still, Kurane fears the worst at those words. No. He caught up with Itachi? Tell me he isn't. He isn't dead, Guy assures her, and Kurane feels something in her chest loosen. But he fought with Itachi before I managed to catch up with him. He's in bad shape. I stayed with him at the hospital until they got him stabilized. I'm going to go back in a bit. Kurane nods. She remembers the strength of Itachi Uchiha's kick, the brutal swiftness in which he moved and the power vibrating through her bones. She doesn't want to imagine the type of damage force like that could inflict on a child. He's going to be alright. I don't know. He's not within my care, so they couldn't release any information to me beyond that he's going to live. Kurane sighs. How annoying. Guy looks past her, toward Kakashi's unconscious form on the bed. Where's Asuma? He went home. He needed to be with his nephew. The green-clad man walks further into the room so that they are both standing by the occupied bed. And Kakashi? Has there been any change? None. But you know how long it usually takes him to recover when exhausting his chakra like this. I don't think we should be too worried yet. Still, Guy looks worried for their friend despite the words. Kurane knows the two of them are extremely close. Despite Kakashi's repeated insistences that Guy is an annoyance he wishes would leave him be, she knows he's actually the person that Kakashi is probably closest to. And vice versa. The two of them are trusted friends, regardless of how they like to dress their relationship up as being that of rivals instead. Did you have to engage with Itachi and Kisame when you caught up with Sasuke? She asks. Guy frowns, turning his head to look at her. Who? Kurane raises an eyebrow at him. What do you mean who? Itachi Uchiha. Kisame Hoshigaki. Did you fight with them? I didn't have to fight with Itachi, says Guy. He'd already retreated by the time I arrived, which was probably for the best no matter how much my heart yearned to fight him. I have no idea who the other guy you're talking about is. Kurane stares at him for a moment, wondering if he's serious or is trying to pull her leg. Kisame Hoshigaki? One of the 7 swordsmen of the Bloody Mist? Wanted for numerous crimes in several countries. A furrow appears between Guy's thick eyebrows as he thinks about it. No. I don't recall him. You just fought him. You know I'm not good with faces. She looks at him incredulously for another moment, before shaking her head and letting it go. Unbelievable. How someone can forget a man with such a distinctive, intimidating appearance, she can't understand. You're going to stay at the hospital with Sasuke, then? Yes, Guy says. He should have someone with him since Kakashi can't be there. And I've been meaning to visit Lee anyway. Kurane hides a grimace at the mention of Guy's crippled student. That match was brutal and should have never been allowed to go so far. Do you think you could check up on Niji and Tenten for me? Let them know where I am. I don't want them to be concerned. Sure, she agrees easily. Though privately, she admits she'd rather not. Guy explained the complex situation to her, but she's still holding a bit of a grudge against that Niji kid for nearly killing Hinata in the prelims. Thank you. Kurane watches him leave the apartment the same way he came in, his usual bright and optimistic expression looking somber and troubled. She looks back at Kakashi in his bed, and prays silently for him to open his eyes. He doesn't. Chapter 3. When he first drifts into consciousness, the first thing that hits him is his utter exhaustion. The bone-deep kind that makes his own limbs feel like heavy lead weights. They attempt to pin him down to his bed, and it's an effort to even pry his eyelids open. Light assaults him once he does, like knives stabbing into his brain, and he slams them back closed with a pained gasp. His Hittite isn't covering his eye. Just a split-second glimpse, and he already feels the drain on his chakra from the Sharingan. The sound of footsteps reaches his ears. He identifies the room he's laying in as his own. The mattress beneath him is familiar, as is the creaking of the wooden floorboard in the hall as someone enters the bedroom. Kakashi's hand goes to wrap around the kunao beneath his pillow, but it isn't there. Guy must have confiscated it again, that irritating menace. A familiar voice calls out his name. Kakashi? Are you? Can you hear me? Kurane. He relaxes once he identifies the voice, feeling his mattress dip as she sits down beside him. Slowly, he attempts to open his eyes again. He blinks against the light, his left eye sucking his energy away. He reaches up to cover it with his hand. My Hittite, he croaks, his voice hoarse. Kurane's eyes widen slightly in realization. She reaches over to the table by his bed, grabbing his forehead protector and quickly pushing it toward him. Here. I'm sorry. Pushing himself up on arms that struggle to hold any weight, he fights the desire to collapse back down as he grabs the Hittite and fixes it around his head, slanting the metal plate so the cloth covers his Sharingan. Immediately, he feels the drain on his chakra cut off. Thank you, Kakashi says. His gaze flickers around his bedroom, acclimating himself to his current surroundings. The cogs in his mind begin turning, trying to recall how he ended up here. The last thing he remembers. Kakashi's breath catches. The memory of pain hits him so suddenly it almost seems real. Blood-red surroundings and a blade being plunged into his gut, blocking out anything other than pain. Naruto, Kakashi gasps, as he fights through that memory and remembers the rest of it. Itachi Uchiha's calm voice as he spoke of his target. Itachi is after him. He's with Jiraiya. We have to. Kurane places a calming hand on his knee as he attempts to move from the bed. Naruto is fine. Though still tensed, Kakashi looks at her face and allows a bit of his urgency to fade. The light outside his window is dim, he realizes. Not quite dark yet, but not the bright afternoon it was before. He must have been unconscious for at least a few hours, plenty of time for Jiraiya to be warned about Itachi and Kisame. How long was I asleep, he asks. You were more than asleep, Kurane tells him, face pinched in worry. Kakashi, you were in a coma. None of us knew when you would wake up. What did Itachi do? Kakashi swallows, trying not to think about it. A genjutsu, he says. A really powerful one. The other Jounin looks like she wants to ask more, but something on his face must give away his extreme reluctance to discuss the subject. She doesn't push it any further. Well, I'm just glad you're okay. How do you feel? Like shit, he says. He meets her gaze with a determined expression. But don't let that stop you from telling me whatever it is that has you looking at me like that. Kurane swallows, averting her eyes. She never was a good liar, and it's her nervous expression that prevents him from relaxing. She bites her bottom lip, reopening the cut that's already there. I really wish I wasn't the one who had to tell you this, she says, exhaling. What happened, Kurane? It's one of his students, it has to be. He can't think of anything else that would cause this hesitance. Not Naruto. Sasuke, then. Itachi said he wasn't after his brother, but his words are hardly ones to be trusted. He can't be dead, Kurane's expression would be much worse if he was. But if something happened. Sasuke came here, Kurane tells him. We were trying to keep the attack quiet, but there were witnesses to what happened. People who saw Itachi and recognized him. Sasuke came here looking for you, and a Jounin burst in at the worst possible moment announcing what happened. As soon as Sasuke heard his brother was after Naruto, he took off. Guy chased after him, but a heavy stone sinks into Kakashi's stomach. Of course Sasuke went after him. Just hearing Itaka was nearby would have undoubtedly been enough, but that the man was after one of his teammates. That must have lit an instant fire in him. For a moment, Kakashi can't breathe. Is he alright? He'll live, Kurane says. Kakashi's chest loosens slightly, and the force of his own relief makes him dizzy. But he was injured badly. Really badly, from how it sounds. Guy took him to the hospital. He's still there now. The relief that he's alive is processed quickly. Fear follows on its tail, dozens of worrying images regarding his student's state passing through his mind, but he pushes those feelings away as well. Stealing his expression, ignoring the weakness present in every part of his body, he throws the covers of his bed back and moves to stand up. Whoa! Kurane stands up from the bed just as he does, eyes widening in alarm. What do you think you're doing? Sit back down. Kakashi gasps as his knees nearly buckle. His vision blurs and he sees double. He closes his eyes against the nausea before he can be sick, and he feels Kurane gripping his arms to keep him steady. He underestimated the severity of his exhaustion, both mental and physical, and all his body wants to do is collapse back down and sleep for at least 10 more hours. He fights against it. I have to go see him, he says, forcing his eyes open. Kurane's face is hazy in front of him. Absolutely not. Look at you. You can barely stand. Kakashi clenches his back teeth. She can't see it due to his mask. I'm fine. You just told me one of my students was placed in the hospital and you aren't even allowed any proper information regarding his condition. You can't expect me to stay here. The woman frowns, sympathy in her face. Kakashi, I get it, okay? I have students now, too. I know what you're feeling. But I can't let you go walking off like this. You'll collapse in the middle of the sidewalk. Kurane can be extremely stubborn when she wants to be. Rather than waste more time arguing with her, Kakashi concedes to a compromise and says, fine, then come with me. You can make sure I don't keel over on the way there. She hesitates for a moment before sighing. I really can't stop you, can I? No. Reluctantly. Kurane escorts him out of his bedroom and out of his apartment. The stairs are a pain to navigate, even though he only lives a few floors up. Pride and stubbornness has him attempting to walk without any support at all, determined to prove a point. But he ends up proving the opposite point when he nearly face plants and is forced to let her hold him by the arm to keep himself upright. All his focus is on keeping his legs beneath him. This was a bad idea, Kurane mutters. You're going to fall down the stairs and crack your head open. Ma. If I die because of you, my ghost will come back to haunt you. If you die it will be no one's fault but yours, idiot. The sun is still in the sky, though it's much lower than it was before that afternoon. The sky's clear color has darkened to a deeper blue. Kakashi estimates the time to be somewhere around 6 o'clock. He was unconscious for at least 5 hours, maybe longer. As they walk, Kurane explains in more detail what happened with Suzuki. Kakashi feels a flash of annoyance as she explains, again, the Jounin running into the room and announcing Itaka's presence in the village. He feels something in his chest clench when he hears how close the two missing nin came to actually getting Naruto. Kakashi was feeling a bit annoyed with Jiraiya for taking his student out of Konoha without asking his permission first, but now he feels nothing but grateful to the man. Without him, who knows what would have happened to Naruto? Did Guy say anything else? Kakashi asks. Itaki and Kisame were obviously after the Ninetales, but do we have any idea why? Kurane shakes her head. I don't know. They must want to release it, right? The Sharingan is capable of controlling tailed beasts, isn't it? That's what I've heard, anyway. The Uchiha clan were even suspected to be responsible for the Kyuubi attack the first time around. Kakashi grits his teeth. That was a rumor. Nothing more. Probably, he thinks with a hint of doubt. Surely. I'm not saying I believe it, says Kurane. I'm just saying that's what people used to think. No one ever talks about it now. When they push through the doors of the hospital, Kakashi's head is pounding and everything around him is alarmingly unfocused. The woman at the front desk gives them the room number Suzuki is in after Kakashi gives her his name. He's been out of surgery for a few hours, she tells them. Surgery? Kakashi thinks, biting down his alarm. It's fine, he assures himself. Sasuke is alive. Whatever else is wrong, however badly he's hurt, it can be dealt with. His room is on the 3rd floor. Kurene's grip is firm on his arm the whole way there. Kakashi is feeling much steadier on his feet now, and he shakes her off as they reach the right floor and turn down the hall. He spots Guy instantly, his green jumpsuit causing him to stand out. He's in the open waiting area, leaning back against the off-color white wall. Kakashi! Guy yells when he spots them, much louder than what is appropriate in a hospital. He pushes himself off the wall. You're awake. I tried to keep him in bed, Kurene says. He wouldn't listen to me. Guy frowns. Are you okay? I'm fine, Kakashi tells him. Liar, Kurene mutters. You look more exhausted than I do. How long have you been here? A few hours. I didn't know when you would wake up, and I just figured the kid should have someone with him. Kakashi feels gratitude swell in his chest, though he feels guilty such a thing was necessary. He should have been here for Sasuke. No, he should have never let Itachi best him. Then he could have stopped this and Sasuke wouldn't even be in here. Thank you, Kakashi says. I appreciate it. Are they letting people see him? Guy nods. I'll take you to his room. I'll stay here, Kurene says. She looks to Guy. Make sure he doesn't fall on his face. He's still weak. Kakashi scowls. I am not, he lies, the floor spinning slightly as he turns around too abruptly. The two of them walk out of the waiting area and down the hallway that connects to it. They pass several closed rooms, and Kakashi turns to Guy. His friend looks nothing like his normal exuberant self, looks exhausted and worn down. He's been uncharacteristically somber since his own student has been in the hospital, and it's so strange to see him without the usual bounce in his step. Kakashi, Guy says. I'm sorry. He blinks. Sorry? What for? I should have been faster. When Sasuke went after Itachi, I chased after him. But I didn't get there in time. Kakashi shakes his head. That wasn't your fault. You brought him back. If anything, it's his fault. Sasuke is his student, not Guy's. It's his responsibility to look after him. He's failed him. He's failed all of them, multiple times, but mostly Sasuke. The boy has only been under his care for a few months and he's already almost died on at least 4 separate occasions. Not for the first time or even the second, or third, or 20th. Kakashi wonders what the hell the Sandaime was thinking making him a teacher. But the man is dead now, and Kakashi can't ask him. When Guy stops in front of one of the rooms and tells him this one is it, Kakashi doesn't let himself hesitate outside. He's seen his student in the hospital already, pale and bruised with an oxygen mask over his face. He's prepared to see it again, steels himself for the worst as he opens the door and steps inside. Sasuke is unconscious on the bed, eyes closed. His complexion is almost colorless, his body fragile and still, and it's only his dark hair and the bruises painted across his skin that prevent him from looking like the white sheets have swallowed him. The one at his neck is the worst. Sasuke's pale, porcelain skin bruises much quicker than people with darker skin tones, and though it's only been a few hours, the imprint of Itachi's fingers is already clearly visible. His throat is a painful blue, slowly edging into purple. There's a dark smudge on his jaw as well, reaching up to his jawbone like charcoal staining a white canvas. His left forearm has been broken and is bandaged, and his bottom lip is split and scabbed over. No doubt there are more injuries hidden by his clothing. Kakashi doesn't react beyond a slight tensing of his shoulders. It's less terrible than he feared, for he was imagining the worst, but still feels like a kick in the chest. Guy must read it in his body language, because he grabs a chair from the corner of the room and drags it forward for Kakashi to collapse into. Damn it, Kakashi breathes. This clenching in his chest, this fear, it's something he still isn't used to. There's a reason he failed all the academy graduates assigned to him in previous years, and it wasn't just because they didn't meet the qualifications of his test. It's because he was terrified of letting anyone close, terrified of letting himself care. He kills everyone whose life he touches, and perhaps it's only cowardice disguised as altruism, but he doesn't want another loss on his soul. He doesn't want the weight of any more ghosts on his shoulders. He isn't used to this. This caring. He doesn't want it. But these kids are his now, and it's too late. He can't imagine throwing them away. He can't imagine their loss not crippling him. Like Sakumo, like Obito, like Rin, like Minato. Guy places a supportive hand on his shoulder. I'm sorry, Kakashi. He bristles at the tone. He isn't dead. I know, Guy says, and Kakashi can hear the frown in his voice. Did I say that? They really wouldn't tell you anything about his condition. No. And I didn't arrive until after the fact, so I didn't witness the actual fight. The green-clad man hesitates a moment before saying reluctantly, but Jiraiya did mention something. He said Itaka put him under some type of genjutsu. I thought maybe. Kakashi tastes something metallic in the back of his throat. It was the same one he used on me. Yeah. Maybe. Apparently he dropped just like you did. Kakashi remembers, with the phantom smell of blood in his nose and the taste in his mouth, the nightmare world Itaka constructed around him. It was like no genjutsu Kakashi's ever seen. There wasn't a single flaw or loose thread to tear at and rip his way out. He remembers how vividly real every sensation felt, the blade plunging into his gut again and again and again until he lost sense of everything that wasn't the pain. He remembers feeling something in his mind break. Falling to his knees in the shallow water, 3 days of torture compounded into a single second. He remembers that, and he imagines it happening to Sasuke. He imagines a 13-year-old child subjected to an attack that a grown adult couldn't fend against. He wishes he could feel more horrified, but the cruelties of this world have numbed him. He allows himself a moment of unguarded weakness, his face falling into his hands and his shoulders slumping inward. Guy's hand tightens on his shoulder. He doesn't say anything, and the room is silent. Eventually, once he feels less like punching someone like hunting down Itaki and punching him, he raises his head from his hands. He stares at Sasuke, at the slow rise and fall of his chest that reassures him he's alive, and he thinks, I should have been there. I should have been there. Does Sakura know, he asks, refocusing his thoughts before he can fall too far into his spiral of self-recrimination. Guy's eyes widen. I didn't even think. I can go to her now. Kakashi shakes his head. No, I'll tell her. She'll take it better coming from me. It's unsettling to see Sasuke so still, but he can't look away. He remembers the night the Uchiha clan were killed, the bodies littering the streets. He remembers Sasuke that night, his small body collapsed and stained in blood, easily mistaken for another corpse. Kakashi only got a glimpse of him before he ordered another Umbu member to take him away, but he imagines he looked a lot like this in the hospital afterwards. Guilt sits heavy in his stomach. Logically, Kakashi knows he likely wouldn't have been able to do anything even if he had been there. Itaka proved already how easily he could take Kakashi out. But guilt is rarely rational, and he still feels responsible. The burden of being a teacher, he supposes. He wonders how Minato was able to bear the weight of it. How he was able to continue on, after 2 out of 3 of his students. No, Kakashi thinks, the memories aching like pressing against a dull bruise. Stop. The hospital door opens. Kakashi tenses, immediately lifting his face from his hands and turning around. Guy drops his hand from his shoulder. The woman standing in the doorway is a young woman, a Mednin, who is holding a clipboard to her chest. Hey take-san. Kakashi stands. He forgets he's still weak, and for a moment his sight blurs. He blinks away double vision, steadying himself by placing a hand on the back of the chair. He ignores the concerned look he gets from Guy. Yes. She inclines her head. Forgive me for keeping you waiting. I only just heard you arrived. What's my student's condition? What did he need surgery for? He was brought in with 3 broken ribs, the Mednin explains. One of them punctured his right lung. The tear wasn't bad, but surgery was still needed to repair it. One of his arteries was damaged as well. It's something very common when one of the upper ribs is broken. The bone often ruptures a major blood vessel. But you fixed it, Kakashi says. He'll be fine, right? The woman hesitates, her lips pressing tightly together. All his physical injuries were dealt with. He should make an easy recovery from them. But psychologically, it appears his brain has undergone severe mental strain. He's fallen into a coma. Kakashi feels the words hit him and processes them. His first reaction is denial, his gaze darting to Sasuke on the bed. "What?" he says, and distress turns his tone harsh. "Well, what are you doing to help him? He's going to wake up, isn't he?" The Mednin sighs and gives him an apologetic look. "I'm sorry, Heitake-san. But I don't know." Chapter 4. Sakura, Mabuki says, a frown pulling at her lips, "You're barely touching your food." Sakura doesn't look at her mother as the woman addresses her. She stares down at her full dinner plate, poking at it with her fork. She's forced a couple bites of potatoes down her throat already, and her stomach rebels at the thought of trying to force down any more. "I'm not feeling very hungry," she says. She sees her mother exchange a worried glance with her father, seated at the dining table next to her. She can't bring herself to care much what they must think truthfully. It's surprising they've noticed her ill mood at all. There's been a pit of snakes writhing in her gut since earlier that afternoon. Since she saw Sasuke, eyes wide in panic and body written in a desperation she'd never seen on him before, not even in the Forest of Death, when he was mere seconds from giving up their scroll. "Where's Naruto?" he demanded. The urgency in that question still echoes in her head hours later. As does the sight of his back, as he spun away from her and ran off. It's been hours, and she hasn't seen him since. She hasn't seen Naruto or Kakashi either. "You do look slightly ill," her mother says, her eyebrows furrowing. She looks to her husband. "What do you think, dear? Does she look ill? Oh, are you sick? Let me feel your forehead." She spots the blurred image of a hand coming in her direction, and she slaps her mother away irritably. "Stop it. I don't have a fever." "But Sakura, I'm just not hungry." Mabuki sits back in her dinner chair, looking affronted as she crosses her arms over her chest. "Well then. Don't speak to your mother like that," says Kaizashi. "She's only concerned. We both are." Sakura's hand clenches tightly around her fork. For once, she mutters a bit louder than she meant to. And what exactly is that supposed to mean? Sakura winces. She hunches her shoulders and stares determinedly down at her dinner. The snake in her gut writhes again, now for an entirely different reason. Mercifully, the doorbell chooses that moment to ring. Sakura shoots up from her chair. "I'll get it," she says, and is running across the room toward the foyer before either of her parents can protest. Her first thought is it has to be Sasuke. Which is stupid and irrational, because Sasuke's never been to her house before. She doesn't think he even knows where she lives. She knows where he lives, of course, but that's unfortunately never been relevant. She's never been to his house either. Her second guess is Kakashi-sensei, and it turns out to be far more accurate. He's standing there on her front porch as she swings the door open, silhouetted by the dark evening sky behind him. A rush of relief hits her at the sight of him. Most of her worry for these past hours has been reserved for Sasuke and for Naruto, as she recalled the sharp desperation in Sasuke's voice when he demanded his location of her. But she was unable to find Kakashi either, and it's only now that she sees him that she realizes how much of her concern was for him as well. Kakashi-sensei is powerful, yes. But he is not invincible. He, too, can be hurt. Can be killed. The land of waves taught her many things. This is but one of them. "Sensei," she exclaims. Standing in the doorway of her home in his Jounin uniform, with his hitayate, Kakashi creates an odd juxtaposition within her. As if two of her worlds are now meeting, when they were never meant to touch. She has never associated her parents with anything shinobi, and she doesn't think they associate her with it either. Not so long as she washes the blood and the dirt off herself before she returns home, and is able to smile at them and pretend she didn't hold her nearly dead teammate in her arms. Not so long as her nightmares are quiet enough as to go unheard through her door. "Sakura," Kakashi says. "I'm sorry to disturb you at home so late." Sakura feels the writhing snake in her gut return. It multiplies, becomes 2, becomes 3. She recalls Sasuke's demand, "Where's Naruto?" and the cold fear in his eyes. Her hand tightens on the door frame, knuckles going white. "Is it Naruto?" she asks. Is he alright? Kakashi shakes his head, and the look in his eye causes dread to settle over her heart. Not Naruto, he tells her. It's Sasuke. Kakashi explains it all to her on the way to the hospital. Sakura's mind is a whirl with questions, with fear. She can taste it in the back of her throat. I didn't even know Sasuke-kun had a brother, she thinks to herself. For some reason, this feels like a failure on her part. Something she should have known. And yet, Itachi. Why does that name sound slightly familiar to her? The memory of it nags at her. Frustratingly, she can't seem to grasp it. Surely Sasuke has never mentioned it? Surely she would remember if he had? Sakura shivers, only in part due to the chilly evening air. She wraps her arms around herself and can feel the goosebumps against her skin. Kakashi casts her a concerned look. I'm fine, she tells him. I'm just cold. I should have grabbed my jacket. We'll be there in a couple minutes, he assures her. He looks rather terrible, Sakura notices. Drained, like in Wave after overusing his chakra. He's unnaturally pale, smudges of dark shadow under his eyes. He's listing a bit as he walks. Are you okay? Did something happen to you, too? She opens her mouth to ask him, but he speaks up before she does, cutting her question off with his own. Why did you think something happened to Naruto when I showed up? Sakura blinks. Huh? Oh, The last time I saw Sasuke-kun, early this afternoon, he ran up to me and demanded to know where Naruto was. It seemed really important he find him. That's why. I see, says Kakashi. Naruto is fine. You needn't worry about him. But then why was Sasuke-kun looking for him? A pause. The Jounin doesn't look at her. I don't know, he finally replies. The two of them fall silent for the rest of the short walk. It's a tense, fraught silence, and the heaviness in Sakura's chest increases with each step closer to the hospital. She feels like she might throw up. She needs to see Sasuke, she has to. But she doesn't want to either, is so terrified. He's in a coma, Kakashi said. Oh God, what if he never wakes up? They reach the hospital, stepping inside the doors and walking up the flights of stairs. They walk down a hallway, then stop in front of one of the rooms. Sakura's gut feels like a pit of vipers. He's in here, Kakashi says gently, and pushes the door open. Sakura freezes. For a moment, her breath is forced from her as if from a punch. Sasuke-kun. Sakura gasps. She runs forward. The boy on the hospital bed doesn't look like Sasuke. He's small and fragile and bruised, all things that Sasuke should never be. And yet, he has been like this before. This is not the first time she has seen him like this or even the second. It is the land of waves all over again, sobbing against his limp, lifeless body. It is the forest of death, feeling the fragility of him as he collapsed in her arms, as she held him to her chest and prayed, not again, not again, not again. Her gaze falls on the oxygen mask over his face, then travels to the bruise across his jaw, the colorful assortment of blues and purples creeping up his neck. Her eyes sting with tears, and she feels Kakashi-sensei step up and drop his hand onto her shoulder. Rule number 25 of the Shinobi Code of Conduct, she reminds herself, just as she did in Wave. A shinobi must not shed tears. Must not show emotion. Unlike then, she succeeds this time. Her eyes and throat both burn persistently, but she digs her nails into the palms of her hands and forces her tears away. She will not cry. She will not break down. She reaches out slowly, laying her hand over Sasuke's. She half expects him to pull away from her, but his hand is still beneath hers. She can see the quiet puffs of his breath behind the mask, fogging it up slightly. Kakashi squeezes her shoulder. For a long time, the two of them stay like that. Sakura stares at the rise and fall of her teammate's chest. Her eyes stray, once again, to the harsh bruises at his throat, the bruises that are so clearly the shape of fingers, a merciless hand wrapped around his neck. Something clenches in her chest. He never told me he had a brother, she says quietly, breaking the silence. How come he never told me? There's a lengthy pause before Kakashi offers an answer. Sasuke is an extremely private person. He doesn't open up to people easily. Surely you've realized that. It's doubtful he would have ever willingly offered up information about Itachi about his family. You knew. I knew Itachi. From before. He never mentioned him to me. She knows nothing about him, she realizes. She stares down at him on the bed in front of her and tries to think of one thing about him that she knows, but she comes up blank. This is the boy she's in love with. The boy she's been in love with for years. How is it possible that she knows nothing about his life? She can't even name his favorite color. Does he even have one? Once again, her gaze catches on the finger-shaped bruises. They make her feel nauseous. How could Sasuke-kun's brother do this to him, she asks. How could? She thinks of her own parents. Her parents, whom she left after fighting with, but it all seems so stupid now. As inconsistent and flighty as her father and mother can be terribly absent one moment, and then annoyingly smothering the next, she knows how much they care for her. She knows what she means to them. She's never had reason to doubt it, not once in her life. She doesn't have a sibling, so perhaps it's different with them than with parents. But she thinks of her dad's warm smiles, her mom's lips pressed against the top of her head, and she doesn't understand. Sakura tightens her grip on Sasuke's hand. Family is supposed to love you, she says. Kakashi's hand slips from her shoulder. With a quiet sigh, he looks down at her. How much do you know about the Uchiha clan massacre? Sakura feels suddenly cold. Not much, she admits. Sasuke never talks about it. No one ever seems to talk about it, except in the occasional hushed whispers and the pitying glances as Sasuke walks down the street. She never noticed them before becoming Sasuke's teammate. She never noticed a lot of things. I remember Sasuke-kun was missing from school for a while, she says. No one was saying why. But then he was back, and... She trails off, trying to think back to that time. She was only 7 years old, and her memories of it are hazy. She doesn't think she ever truly understood what happened then. She doesn't remember learning about the massacre. She just remembers wondering where Sasuke was, then being happy when he was suddenly back. She doesn't remember questioning it any farther. It should have been a bigger deal, she thinks. An entire clan was slaughtered. Why can't she remember hearing about it? She knows Sasuke's family is dead. She knows about the massacre. But she can't recall learning about it, can't recall when the news of it first reached her ears. The knowledge is just there, as it has been for years, she's never given any real thought to it. Sasuke-kun's family is dead, Sakura thinks, and suddenly there's a weight to the knowledge that was never there before. It sits heavy on her chest. Did Sasuke-kun see it? Was he there? It was Itachi, Kakashi says. He was the one who killed them. He fled Konoha that same night. Sakura's head snaps to look at him. What? It's not classified information, but it's not exactly public knowledge either. Sakura's mind whirls. She can't think of anything to say through her shock. Kakashi already told her of the man's status as a missing nin, but that was why? He murdered his own family? Sakura suddenly recalls Sasuke on that rooftop, on that late afternoon when Team 7 first introduced themselves. Hands stapled under his chin, bangs falling into his face and throwing his expression into shadow. Voice shaking with something darker but more fragile than rage, as he made a vow of murder on a nameless man. His brother. His brother is who he was talking about. Sakura swallows. Is that why he did this to Sasuke-kun? He was trying to finish the job from when he killed the rest of his family. Kakashi hesitates on his response. I don't know. Maybe. But Sakura frowns, remembering earlier that afternoon. The last time she'd seen her dark-haired teammate before this befell him. Then why was Sasuke-kun looking for Naruto? Why did he look so scared? She bites the inside of her lip, looking back to the frail and bruised boy on the bed. Is there really nothing we can do? Sakura asks. There has to be something. Some way to help Sasuke-kun. Naruto has gone with Jiraiya to seek out Tsunade. She's the best medical ninja Konoha's ever had. If anyone stands a chance at fixing Sasuke, it's her. So what, we just wait. Kakashi's hand settles on her head. We wait, he repeats firmly, and we make sure he knows he has a reason to wake up. Chapter 5. They've been walking for what feels like forever when Jiraiya finally agrees to stop. They've grown too tired to keep on, and the sun has long since set, so as soon as they reach the next village they head to the closest hotel. All notions of sleep fly from Jiraiya's mind when he lays eyes on the sexy young woman at the concierge desk. Rolling his eyes, Naruto takes the room keys for himself, stomping up the flights of stairs. Old pervert, he grumbles, as he searches the numbers on the walls for the one that matches the key. He wonders how long it will take Jiraiya to realize the girl isn't interested and follow him up. When he finds the correct room, he opens it up and immediately throws himself on the bed. He's tired, and he's irritated, and his mind is spinning with questions that the Sunin refused to answer. He buries his face in the pillow in front of him, which doesn't smell like it's been washed recently. He's spent most of their journey staving off his worry, his confusion, and it's only now that he's stopped that he allows himself to feel it again. His mind is filled with images, with sounds. Eyes that were just like Sasuke's, yet somehow, nothing like Sasuke's at all. The splintering of bone. Broken screams. Naruto's almost tempted to cover his ears, but he knows it won't stop him from hearing the noise. None of it is real anymore, it's all inside his head. Naruto remembers Sasuke screaming, can't stop remembering, and he doesn't understand. Naruto doesn't know what happened at the hotel. He tries to sort it out in his head in a way that makes sense, but all of it is a jumble. Jiraiya knows, Naruto knows he knows, but he isn't talking. Sasuke is hurt, possibly dying, but Jiraiya isn't explaining anything to him, and that's not okay. He has so many questions. Questions that swirl in his head and grow louder and louder the longer they go unanswered. He can't breathe beneath the weight of them. Who were those two guys? How did they know about the Kyuubi? Why is Sasuke's brother after it? Why does Sasuke hate him so much? Is Sasuke okay? Naruto growls into his pillow. It smells like dust and like somebody else's sweat, and he takes it and chucks it across the room. It lands on the floor near the doorway, just as the door opens and Jiraiya steps inside. Jiraiya glances between the pillow and Naruto, bemused. Naruto scoots toward the end of the bed, facing the Sunin. He glowers. Bastard, he says. Took you long enough. Jiraiya rubs the back of his neck a bit sheepishly, grinning. He avoids looking Naruto directly in the face. The glare he's sporting looks distinctly Kushina-like, and it causes the man to sweat. Sorry. But I could hardly just abandon such a beautiful woman for an empty bed without. Naruto's nose wrinkles. Gross. I don't care. His eyes are like blue steel as he looks at him. Pervy sage, tell me about those ninja at the hotel. Stop avoiding my questions. Jiraiya sighs as he walks to sit down on the end of the bed next to Naruto's. The kid has been badgering him on the subject ever since they left Sasuke behind, and Jiraiya has been getting increasingly more creative in deflecting his questions. But he can't keep it up forever, and he knows that Naruto isn't going to let it go. Naruto, he says heavily, I can't tell you. The information is, it's not something you need to know. Oh, Naruto replies, and there's real anger in his voice now. Like how me having the Kyuubi inside me wasn't something I needed to know. Jiraiya winces, because he knows the kid is right. There's so much about himself that's been kept from him that's still being kept from him, and that isn't right. The problem is, Jiraiya doesn't know what he can tell him. That sort of thing is usually up to the third, and he's gone now. Jiraiya feels a deep ache of grief at the thought of his sensei along with a sharp spike of anger. Orochimaru. How could you? Jiraiya's mind falls back on a memory. The three of them gathered around a campfire, back when things were still simple, before the horrors of war tore them apart. He remembers a boy with pale skin and serpentine eyes, he remembers how the signs were there even then, but he refused to see them. I want to master ninjutsu. And become stronger than anyone. Oh? For what purpose? For what purpose? A pause. The slightest quirk to his lips. I've never thought about such a thing. Fine. Naruto yells, and Jiraiya is jolted roughly back to the present. Don't tell me about those cloak guys, then. But you have to tell me about Sasuke. Jiraiya blinks, shaking the remnants of the memory from his head. He focuses back on Naruto's words. Sasuke? I already told you, he should be fine so long as... Naruto shakes his head. No, not that. I want to know about Itachi Uchiha. How is it Sasuke has a brother? His family is dead, aren't they? Naruto's thought about it, and it's just another thing in a mess of things that don't make sense. He doesn't know anything specific about what happened to Sasuke's family, but he knows that they're dead. All of them. He knows it was something awful, the kind of tragic story that people like to whisper about but never actually talk about. He remembers the day he first heard about it. He remembers Sasuke being missing from class for a week, and then suddenly he was back, and everyone had suddenly been looking at him and whispering. Wide eyes and hushed voices, words like slaughtered and killed and all gone. Did you hear? They had all said. How awful. How terrible. Sasuke hadn't reacted, had remained frozen in his seat, staring straight ahead. Jiraiya is making a complicated expression. I'm not sure I should tell you about that. Naruto makes an indignant face, but Jiraiya holds up a hand before he can speak. Not because I'm not allowed to. I'm just not sure it's my place. Sasuke's history with his brother is personal. If he hasn't told you. He never tells me anything. Naruto yells. Have you asked him? Naruto opens his mouth, then pauses. He closes it. Jiraiya looks at him with a raised eyebrow, and Naruto frowns. He hasn't asked him, he realizes. He's never asked Sasuke a single thing about himself. He's never bothered with getting to know him, he's been too busy trying to prove that he's better. My brother. I promised myself. I'd stay alive, until I killed him. And Sasuke had told him he had a brother, hadn't he? Bleeding in Naruto's arms, the breath leaving his body. And Naruto never. Naruto looks down, biting the inside of his cheek. He feels strangely ashamed of himself. Jiraiya watches Naruto, studies the turmoil so clearly on his face. He sighs. Fine, I'll tell you, he says. But just the general story. No details, all right? You can get those from Sasuke. I'm never getting any details, Naruto thinks. He straightens, turning his full attention to Jiraiya. No way Sasuke would ever tell me anything. This is the only information I'll get. You know when the massacre took place? Jiraiya asks. Naruto nods. He doesn't remember the exact date, but he remembers the time it took place around. It was really hot, he remembers. Summer. Yeah, it was 5 years ago, he answers. It was July, I think. Everyone was excited, because vacation was coming up. He's starting to remember it more clearly now. Sasuke had been missing from class those last few days. He was back when they returned from their break in August. That's when Naruto first heard about the massacre. That's when he started seeing Sasuke sitting by himself on the end of the dock and realized that he was now just as alone as Naruto was. That night when Sasuke returned to the Uchiha compound, says Jiraiya, he witnessed his brother kill his entire clan. I'm not privy to the details, I don't know why he was left alive. But he was the only survivor. Naruto processes that slowly. For some reason, the first thing that he thinks is, Sasuke was there? He saw it happen? He's not sure why that's the revelation that hits him first. Maybe the fact that Sasuke's brother is the one who killed his family is just too shocking. He's never really thought about the massacre itself. He's thought about its aftermath, what it caused. He's thought about Sasuke sitting on the end of that dock, of going home to an empty house, of being all by himself, just like Naruto. He's thought a lot about the massacre's results, but never about the actual event. It isn't that he thought Sasuke wasn't there when his family was killed. It's just that he never thought about it. It's then that the other part of the words finally registers. Naruto lifts his head and stares. It takes a few moments for him to speak. Sasuke's brother killed them. Jiraiya nods. His face is grimmer than Naruto's ever seen it. Naruto thinks back to that hallway, to the pure hatred in Sasuke's eyes. The desperation that drove him to keep fighting, to keep standing up, even every time he got beat down. Naruto's never had a family. He doesn't know what having a brother is like. But he imagines how it would feel if the person closest to his heart ripped everything he cared for away, and in that moment, he thinks he's closer to understanding Sasuke than he's ever been. He wants revenge, Naruto realizes. He remembers Sasuke on the day Team 7 was formed, hands stapled under his chin as he made a vow of murder. He wants to kill him. Jiraiya nods. Yes. Naruto thinks about Itachi. He remembers the coldness in his eyes and in his voice. He remembers the uncaring way he looked at Sasuke, remembers the hand around Sasuke's wrist, around his throat. Naruto remembers the sound of broken screams, of bones snapping. A fire burns in his chest, and in that moment, he understands Sasuke perfectly. He's never hated anyone as much as he hates Itachi Uchiha. Why didn't you do anything? Naruto demands. His hands are shaking, and he curls them into fists. You just watched. Why didn't you stop him? Jiraiya winces. Regret flashes across his face. I underestimated Sasuke's rage and Itachi's brutality. I don't know if I could have taken Itachi out not without destroying myself as well, but I should have stepped in much sooner. Naruto stares at him, his rage quelled by the words. Not without destroying myself. A shiver of fear goes through him. He's really that powerful, he asks quietly. He is, Jiraiya confirms. His eyes are dark. That at the hotel? That was nothing. Naruto looks away. He won't deny it, Jiraiya's words terrify him. I don't stand a chance against someone like that. Will they come after me again, he asks. Because of the Kyuubi. Jiraiya watches him for a long moment. Go to sleep, Naruto, he says finally. We'll talk more in the morning. Yes, Naruto thinks, as he pulls back the covers and slides into the bed. That means yes. Jiraiya flips off the light. He slides into the bed that's next to him, and Naruto closes his eyes, trying to forget what Sasuke looked like on that hotel floor. He drifts off slowly, mind still spinning. He dreams of two pairs of red eyes, one like fire and the other like ice. Check the description for the links to the author.